Hello and welcome back to the first video. And in this video, we want to dive now into Power BI, okay? So let's get started. Hopefully you all open Power BI, and this is the interface you should see, okay? So at the beginning, we have this interface, and now we're gonna load the data. So you can download the easy Excel file from the resource section, and this is the file we're gonna work with in this video, and then the next one. Okay. So what we're going to do is we go to get data here, or if you do not want to do it this way, as I said before, you can also close this here and say simply click on get data here. Okay. So there are two options actually. This little down arrow here, if you click here, then the data sources appear here. If you click up here, then a new window opens like that. Okay. So get data, and now we have all the different kinds of data sources. Now let's say in this case we want to load an Excel file, right? So I click on Excel and click on Connect. You can also double click on it, by the way. And then this is actually the file I want to load. So I'm already in my folder. If you have not specified the folder path yet, simply navigate to the specific file, okay? So, and now I can double click on it. Easy, double click. And then I just wait until the navigator opens. Here it is. And now what I can do is I can simply click on a specific file and I get a preview, okay, of my data. And just in case you're wondering why exactly you actually have, I can make it a little bigger here, so you have to see the whole table, why we have two files here, okay, right? Because we can see this little table here, this table icon, and we can see the sheet. And this is exactly the difference between those two. Because if I open the Excel file, just to give you an overview here, I click on it, and that's what the file looks like, okay? And we can see we got table 1 here. This is the name of the sheet, and this is why it appears in the Power BI file inside here. This is the whole sheet, and the blue bar up on the top, this is actually the table itself. So if I highlight the table like that, you can see it's called easy TBL, so TBL for table, okay? And this is why actually we have two files in here. So now you can decide whether you want to load the table itself or the whole sheet. In our case, it makes no difference, right? Because we do not have additional data on this sheet. But for instance, if you have some text or additional tables in here, and you only want to import a specific table from a worksheet, then it makes sense, of course, to click this little icon up here, because you want to only import a specific table, right? And from my personal experience, I would always go with the table. So just to make sure you load the correct data, I would always go with the table icon, okay? But this is just from my personal experience. It's up to you what you prefer. Okay, so as soon as you have selected one of them, you can click on load. You can see it's already highlighted. This is the reason, because most people will click on load. But of course, if you want to edit this in the query editor, maybe the table is not in the right format, or you want to transform certain things, you could do it. Simply click on the edit button. But of course, this is also possible later. Okay, so if we click on load now, simply to load the data inside Power BI, and just wait until it's loaded into the model, we can see that now we can see all the different kinds of, in this case, the column names here inside this little field, well, pane, okay? So we can see that we got the amount, the country, the product, the profit, and so on. And if we go back to our Excel file, we can see these are exactly the country, the selling price, the amount, the revenue, product, and so on. So exactly the column names, even though they are not sorted this way, okay? But they all appear in here, okay? Because they're by default sorted alphabetically. You can also see that we got this little, well, sum icon in front of some of the columns. And the reason simply is because whenever we have numerical values and Power BI is recognizing those as numerical values, then by default it's aggregating the data. That's why you can see the sum icon here. Okay, and let me just close the filter here, just make so we have a little bit more space on our report view. So beside that, of course, we can also click now on the table, on the data here, and we can see we got a preview of our data set. Okay, this is exactly the same as we can see in Excel, but here we can see it within Power BI. If we go to the relationship view, which we already covered in the last video, just that what it is, we can see here we also got our table. And this is now basically where you set up your model, or we have your model and can create relationships to other tables. So let's say you have a second table, and the second table has a country ID, for instance, or this table has a country ID, and the other table has a country ID, and with a specific country names, then we can now create actually the relationships in here, okay? Because then we would have additional tables inside here. Alright, and the third one, as I said before, this is only sugar coding, just in case you want to highlight or just show specific parts of your model. Especially, well, it's helpful if you have a really, really big model, then this could be specifically helpful. But for us now, we only have one table, because we want to simply get an introduction into how easy it actually is to create Power BI reports, right? Okay, so that's it actually for just loading the data. And now we can actually start creating reports. And it's really, really easy, because all we need to do is we need to decide what kind of data we want to see, and then we can simply click on the specific, well, column to visualize it, okay? So for instance, I could say I want to see now, let's say I want to see the countries. I click on the country icon here, and then I'd like to switch this. Currently, you can see by default, the country, it has generated, in this case, well, a map, because Power BI has already recognized this as a country, so actually as a geographic location icon. However, is that not the case for you? What you can do then is you go to modeling up here, and then you can say, at first, of course, you need to highlight it, so click on country, then you go to the modeling tab, and then you can say for the data category, not that it's uncategorized, but instead you would click on it, like that, and then you would say this, for instance, is in this case a country. Okay, so you can say specific here, it's a country region, and if you click on this, then you can see this little globe icon appears here, and this simply means that now we have transformed this into well, a geographical field. Okay, so whenever Power BI is not recognizing the countries by default, then you would want to switch this here, and then Power BI should recognize the fields. Okay. Now we have seen by default Power BI has created a map, and the reason is that simply Power BI has recognized this as a geographical field. Normally, if we select anything, so let me just delete this, simply delete this for now. If we select any kind of column which represents a string, for instance the product, okay, we have only product names here, it's simply a string field. If we click on it, then by default Power BI will always create a table at first, okay? And then we could say I want to, now I have seen my products, and I want to see, for instance, the revenue by product. I can simply click on the revenue icon here, and then I can see the revenue by product. And just that you can see it, we'll make it a little bit bigger. So all I need to do is I need to select the specific visual. In this case, it's my table. And then I can go to this little format icon here. I click on format, and then I have different kinds of format options for my table here, okay? So the general format options, let's go through that. This is for the X and the Y position. So where exactly do we want to place this visual? Of course, we can also click on these three dot icons and hold Control, or hold the mouse key and simply drag and drop it and place it anywhere. And you can also see we have these red lines. So just we want to place it, for instance, in the middle, and we can, now it's exactly in the middle, for instance, like that, right? But of course, we could also specify if we want to make it pixel perfect, right? We could specify the X and the Y position. For instance, I could say the X position is 300, and you can see that now the table has shifted to the left. So it works exactly the same for the Y. And for the width and the height, we could specify how big is the size. But of course, we could also simply drag and drop it like that. Okay, what else? The style. We have different kinds of styling options for tables, right? We have a default style, which looks like that. And of course, we can switch this. There's this minimum one, for instance, or there is the alternate rows, and so on. So there are a lot of styles here, and I just want to encourage you, try them out, okay? Find the one which fits you the best. So I like it actually pretty, well, simple. I often use just simply this none style, but it's really up to you. You can use any one you like, okay? So for the grid, also, you want to place a vertical grid or not, you can see there's a little line. So hopefully you can see it. Let me make it black. So now you can see it if you want to see this line or not, and so on. So different kinds of table styling options. So what interesting for us now is, currently it's really, really small, right? So what we can do is we simply go, in this case, to the value section, and beside the colors, which we have here, we can also set the size and as well as the font. For instance, I could say I make this, let's say, I make that 14, like that, and now the size is already a little bit bigger, right? So for our table. And of course, we would do the same then for the columns. So we simply then select column headers, and we could go exactly the same way. Could also say we want to make that 14, for instance, right? And then we make the table a little bigger, and we got our table. And you can see, as we said before, by default, Power BI is summing up this data. So that's why you can see the revenue, which is simply summed up for each of the products. Even though if we go back to our Excel file, just in case you understand, of course, we have a product, in this case, products which appear several times. For instance, the iPhone here appears, of course, several times. But of course, Power BI is simply aggregating the data here and shows the complete data for the iPhone. Okay, here for the revenue column. Simply this means by simply summing up this data. Okay. Beside that, if we click on this again, simply close this formatting here, and we have additional things here, right? Like field formatting, conditional formatting. For instance, you would like to say if the revenue is above a certain threshold, for instance 3,000, then you want to color it in a certain way. You could also do it here, okay? So there are actually a lot of different customization options which you can use and leverage here. Okay, so that's it for the table. And now let's continue with additional visuals. But I want to cut this video here because from student feedback I received is that simply the video should not be too long, so I wanted to cut this and we go on with the next video, okay? So in case you got any questions, feel free to ask them. Otherwise, see you in the next video. Until then, best guys.